Xander Knox didn't expect a woman in muddy sneakers and a paint-streaked t-shirt to completely derail the most laid-back event he'd hosted all year. The smell of sizzling ribs filled the air as music drifted from hidden outdoor speakers. Xander stood barefoot near the grill on the sprawling deck of his Lake Tahoe estate, wearing cargo shorts and a black linen button-down rolled halfway up his forearms. Around him, a small group of hand-picked friends and employees laughed over beers and burgers beneath the string lights swaying above the patio. The whole thing was supposed to be low-key, just a casual backyard BBQ, nothing press, nothing flashy until she walked in. Hey, hi, sorry I think I wandered into the wrong backyard, a woman said, pausing at the edge of the stone path. He turned, tongs still in hand. She stood awkwardly, holding a glass baking dish covered in foil. Her hair was pulled into a messy ponytail and a smudge of blue paint streaked her cheekbone. She was definitely not one of his guests. I'm Piper Monroe, she said, cheeks flushing. I just moved into the house next door. I thought this was a neighborhood thing. I heard music and smelled food, so… She lifted the dish. Mac and cheese, Xander blinked, then he laughed. A full, deep, surprised laugh that made a few heads turn. It's not a neighborhood thing, he said, stepping forward, but I'm not going to turn away someone holding homemade mac and cheese. Her shoulders lowered. Oh, thank God, I was about to die of embarrassment. You almost did, he teased. But you saved yourself with carbs, come on. By the time she stepped fully onto the deck, the rest of the group had turned their attention back to their own conversations. Xander led her over to the grill, gesturing to the wide wooden table nearby. Set it there. You're officially part of the party now, she grinned, and he noticed her eyes green, clear, and curious before quickly looking away. You sure? I don't want to crash anything. You didn't crash, you wandered in, totally different, he said, flipping a steak. Besides, you brought food. You're already more useful than half the people here. Piper laughed softly, setting the dish down. She glanced around at the huge deck, the view of the lake beyond it, the sleek outdoor kitchen, and the high-end sound system tucked discreetly into the landscape. So, this is your place, she asked. Yeah, she gave him a look. You don't strike me as the grill for 18 type, he shrugged. People keep expecting me to be something I'm not. It's fun to let them guess. You're not going to tell me what you do, are you? Not unless you ask real nice. Right. Okay, mystery grill master, she said, folding her arms. You always host BBQs for strangers. Only the pretty ones who show up with mac and cheese. She blinked, caught off guard, her cheeks pinked, but she didn't look away. The rest of the evening blurred into warm conversation, easy laughter, and more than one accidental brush of hands as they stood near the grill. Xander found himself drawn to her in a way that caught him off guard. She was nothing like the women he usually met, no designer heels, no carefully curated small talk. She was real, relaxed, effortlessly funny. At one point she gestured toward the lake beyond the trees. I still can't believe I live here. The house next door, it's a mess, total fixer-upper. But I figured it was worth it for the view and for the quiet, he raised a brow. Quiet, huh, sorry in advance, sometimes I host parties. I'll allow it, she said, smiling. As long as you keep feeding me, he stared at her, not bothering to hide it this time. Deal? By the time the sun dipped low and guests began to leave, Piper was sitting on the wide porch swing with a paper plate balanced on her knee, laughing at a story Xander was telling about a time he accidentally set off his own security system. I'm starting to think you're not as cool and collected as you look. He leaned back beside her. I'm not, but don't tell anyone. I've got a reputation to protect. She laughed, then turned to him. Thanks for not kicking me out. Thanks for not running away. She looked like she might say something else, but her phone buzzed in her back pocket. She pulled it out, glanced at the screen, then sighed. I should go. My contractor's coming early tomorrow, and I still haven't unpacked half my boxes. Xander stood with her. Let me walk you back, she hesitated. It's literally the house next to yours. I know, still. They walked down the garden path together, past the hedges that separated their properties. Her house was smaller but charming, white clapboard, wraparound porch, clearly in the middle of renovations. She turned to face him at the bottom of her steps. "Well," she said, rocking on her heels, "thanks for letting me stay. I'm guessing I probably owe you some ribs. You brought mac and cheese, we're even." She smiled. Then, after a pause, she said, "You're not what I expected." He stepped closer. "Neither are you." For a second, they just stood there close, quiet, the air between them charged with something unspoken. Piper stepped back. "Good night, mystery man. Good night, neighbor." She disappeared inside, and Xander stared after her for a long moment, hands in his pockets. He'd thrown a casual BBQ, nothing fancy. Just something to take his mind off business. He didn't expect her. He didn't expect to still be thinking about her hours later, sitting alone on his deck with a beer in hand. And he definitely didn't expect the way his heart had kicked when she smiled at him like that. She was just a neighbor. But something about Piper Monroe had already gotten under his skin. The following morning, Xander stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office, hands clasped behind his back. The view beyond the glass was breathtaking. Lake Tahoe stretched like a sheet of molten silver under the rising sun, but his mind wasn't on the water. It was on the woman who'd wandered into his life holding a casserole dish. He hadn't planned on being distracted today. There were calls to make, contracts to sign. His tech investment fund had just closed its largest seed round to date. But as he scrolled through his calendar, his eyes kept drifting to the line he'd penciled in weeks ago. Site visit, Knox Estates Lot 2, the property adjacent to his. The one Piper now owned. He grabbed his keys before he could talk himself out of it. When he pulled up to her place, the driveway was filled with mismatched boxes and bags. A beat-up silver hatchback sat parked near the porch, its backseat crammed with tools and what looked like rolled-up blueprints. The front door was open, and somewhere inside, a hammer struck wood in a steady rhythm. He stepped onto the porch and knocked against the doorframe. "Piper," she appeared in the hallway, wearing overalls that had definitely seen better days and a bandana holding back her curls. She was holding a crowbar and breathing hard. "You're either here to complain about noise or offer free labor," she said, wiping her forehead with her wrist. "Door number 2, he said. "I had a meeting cancel, thought I'd check in." She eyed him warily. "You don't strike me as the kind of guy who has meetings that just cancel." "I don't strike you as anything accurate, apparently." She set the crowbar down beside her. "Well, if you're volunteering, I've got a stubborn cabinet in the kitchen that refuses to come off the wall." "You any good with old hinges?" "I'm good with a lot of things," he said, stepping inside. The house smelled like sawdust and citrus cleaner. The hardwood floors were half-sanded and the staircase railing looked newly replaced. He followed her into the kitchen, where a row of upper cabinets hung crooked above the sink. "Trying to open up the space," she said, gesturing, "but these things are holding on like their lives depend on it." He reached up to inspect the screws. "You doing this all yourself?" "Mostly. I've got a contractor for the big stuff, but the rest, me, a toolbox, and YouTube tutorials. You like a challenge. I like not going broke." He glanced at her. "You'd rather tear apart a house than pay someone, depends on the house." "And the someone?" He pulled a multi-tool from his pocket and started working on the cabinet. She watched him, arms crossed. "So, what's your actual job?" she asked. "You going to keep being mysterious forever? Depends how long you plan on asking." She raised a brow. "That sounds like a deflection." "Maybe it is." He popped the cabinet loose with a satisfying creak, then looked at her. "What about you? What brought you here?" She paused. "After my mom passed, I needed a reset. I'd been in Chicago too long. Everything there reminded me of her. Found this place on a foreclosure listing and thought, why not?" He stepped down from the counter. "That's brave," she shrugged. "Or reckless, I guess I'll find out." There was something raw in the way she said it, no self-pity, just honesty. He admired that. "You're not alone in this, you know." She looked at him. "I am, actually, but that's okay." He nodded, then picked up the next cabinet. "Well, you're not for today. I'm here, and I'm excellent at demolition." By the time the sun moved past the front windows, they'd taken down the entire row. Dust coated their arms, and broken wood lay in a heap on the floor, but Piper was smiling. "I didn't think you were serious," she said, catching her breath. "You actually helped. I told you, I'm full of surprises." She leaned against the counter. "You ever take a break?" He checked his watch. I do now. They ended up on the front porch with two mismatched mugs of lemonade sitting side by side on the top step. Her dog, a tawny mutt with a freckled snout, wandered up from the backyard and flopped beside her. I didn't know you had a dog, he said, reaching down to scratch behind its ears. She's a rescue. Found her in a shelter outside Sacramento. Her name's Clementine. Clementine sighed dramatically, resting her head on Piper's boot. You know, Piper said, I was expecting Tahoe to be quiet, peaceful. Not filled with mysterious neighbors who show up with power tools and charm their way into my kitchen. It's a strange town, he said, sipping. You never know who lives behind the hedges. She gave him a look. Speaking of which, you didn't answer me earlier. He raised a brow. What you do for work? He hesitated. I co-founded a tech firm, he said finally. We build software for enterprise systems, automation, data integration, that kind of thing. Her eyes narrowed. That sounds wildly vague. It's supposed to. Keeps people from asking more questions, she laughed. You're a terrible mystery, or a very good one. She leaned back on her elbows, watching the clouds drift overhead. You ever get tired of pretending you're normal? He looked at her. You see right through me, don't you? Little bit. They sat in silence for a while, the breeze rustling the trees around them. Thank you, she said suddenly. For what? For showing up. For not making it weird. Most guys would have just waved across the driveway and gone back to their perfect lives. I don't have a perfect life. No, just a very well landscaped one, she smiled. Still counts. He stood, brushing dust off his jeans. I should head out. I actually do have a meeting in an hour. She got to her feet too. Well, in case I haven't said it, if you ever want to trade software for manual labor, I've got a porch that needs sanding. I'll keep that in mind. As he walked back toward his car, he glanced over his shoulder. She was still standing at the top of the steps, watching him. And for the first time in months, the thought of getting back to work didn't thrill him. It felt like leaving something unfinished. Xander adjusted the cuff of his tailored shirt as he stepped into the lobby of the Tahoe Valley Museum. The sharp scent of wood polish mixing with the faint trace of lavender from the flower arrangements lining the entrance. The annual Donors Gala was underway, a polished crowd milling beneath the high vaulted ceiling, champagne flutes in hand, laughter bouncing off the marble. A string quartet played near the staircase, their music delicate and quick. He hadn't planned to come tonight. After weeks of traveling between San Francisco and Seattle for board meetings, he'd barely had a day to breathe. But when he'd seen Piper 2 mornings ago kneeling in the dirt planting hydrangeas with Clementine curled beside her, it had pulled something taut inside him. He hadn't gone over. He hadn't said a word, but he hadn't stopped thinking about her since, and now here he was in a tuxedo, feeling out of place in a room filled with people who knew only the polished version of him. Xander Knox, a voice drawled behind him. Still allergic to small talk, he turned to find Sabine Lawrence, the museum's director, approaching in a silk gown that glittered under the chandelier light. I'm trying to work on it, he said, offering a polite nod. Well, pretend harder. The Watsons are here and they've brought their checkbook. He gave her a half smile and moved deeper into the crowd. Champagne was offered, and though he took a glass, he barely sipped. His mind wasn't here, not really. He'd thought the room would distract him. Instead, the weight of the evening only made her absence more noticeable. Xander, he glanced over to see Ethan North, one of his old Stanford classmates turned venture capitalist, raising his glass. Still hiding in mountain houses, I see, Ethan said. You ever coming back to the city? Depends on the noise level, Xander replied. You're missing out. There's a new private club opening in Soma, invite only. You'd like it, rooftop pool, zero press. Xander's expression didn't change. Sounds like a nightmare. Ethan laughed, clapped him on the shoulder, and wandered off toward the bar. Xander turned away, his eyes scanning the room without meaning to. And then he saw her, Piper. She stood near the edge of the gallery, beneath a bronze sculpture of a swan in flight. Her dress was simple black, sleeveless, with a neckline that dipped just enough to catch the eye, but it was the way she held herself that made people look twice. No jewelry except for a gold bracelet on her wrist, no elaborate hairdo, just clean lines and quiet confidence. She hadn't seen him yet. She was talking to a woman in a blue pantsuit, nodding politely, her eyes flicking across the room like she was trying to find a foothold. He crossed the floor before he could talk himself out of it. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said, stopping beside her. She turned, eyes widening slightly. "I could say the same. You clean up well," her lips curved. "So do you, though I figured you were the type to live in tuxedos." "I'm more of a flannel and boots guy when I can help it." She looked around. "This isn't really my scene." "What brought you?" "Contractor's wife works here. She had an extra ticket and thought I could use a night off from drywall dust." He nodded. "You look like you belong." "I definitely don't," she said, lowering her voice. "I nearly tripped over a sculpture on the way in. I think it was supposed to be a fish. Or maybe a melted violin." He laughed under his breath. "Modern art, it's meant to confuse you. Then it's doing a fantastic job." They stood in quiet for a moment, the music winding around them. "You hungry?" he asked. She blinked. "At a gala, there's a side terrace. They brought in a private chef for the trustees. Better food, fewer people." She hesitated. "Are you allowed to invite people to that?" "I fund a quarter of this place. I think I can bend a rule." He led her through a side corridor, past a velvet rope and a security guard who gave a small nod. Outside, the terrace overlooked the lake, the breeze tugging at the linen tablecloths. The tables were mostly empty, save for a few older couples sipping wine. Piper stepped to the edge of the stone railing. "Okay, this is ridiculous. I feel like I just stepped into a movie." He watched her profile as she looked out at the water. "You've been quiet," she said after a beat. "Everything okay?" He folded his arms. "Business has been loud lately. This was supposed to be a quiet season, but I can't seem to stay still. You don't strike me as someone who's good at stillness." "I'm not, but lately I've been thinking about what that means, what I'm running from." She turned toward him. "And I don't know yet." Their eyes held for a second longer than necessary. A waiter approached, offering 2 plates of seared duck and heirloom vegetables. They took them and sat at a table near the edge, the soft clinks of silverware the only sound between them for a moment. "This is the best food I've ever eaten on a museum patio," Piper said lightly, high praise. "I'm serious. I'm used to boxed pasta and lukewarm coffee." "You could have just said you missed my ribs," she laughed, and the sound loosened something in his chest. "You're different here," she said softly. "How do you mean?" "Here, people look at you like you're something polished, untouchable. But the guy who helped me rip down cabinets, that guy was real." He set his fork down. "They're both me. But I don't always get to choose who people see. You can with me." The words hung there, soft but certain. He didn't touch his food after that. He just watched her, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the way her eyes flicked to his and held. When they stood to leave, he didn't offer his arm. She didn't need guiding. Back in the main hall, the crowd had thickened. A slow song played now, couples drifting out onto the floor. Piper hesitated, glancing at the doors. "Dance with me," he said quietly, her brows lifted. "You do that too, only when it matters." She took his hand. They moved together slowly, the lights above casting soft glows across her shoulders. He could feel the shift in her breathing, the way her fingers tightened slightly in his. "You're doing that thing again," she murmured. "What thing?" Looking at me like I'm a puzzle. "You're not a puzzle, you're the answer." Her gaze held his, and for a second, the music, the crowd, the glittering world around them, it all fell away. He didn't kiss her, not here, not yet. But his hand lingered against her back long after the music stopped, and when she stepped away, her eyes said everything he didn't have the nerve to say out loud. Not yet. But soon. Piper stood at the edge of the dock behind her house, the morning sun catching in her curls as she looked out over the still water. She hadn't planned on waking early, but her thoughts hadn't let her sleep. She hadn't expected last night to feel like a turning point, but it had. Every moment with Xander lingered in her chest like a pulse. The way he'd looked at her when the music shifted. The way he hadn't needed to say anything for her to know she hadn't intended to fall for him, but the truth had settled without warning. She was in love with her neighbor. And that terrified her more than she wanted to admit. Behind her, Clementine barked from the porch, tail thumping. Piper turned. A car door shut next door, the deep, smooth sound of a vehicle built for speed. A few seconds later, Xander came through the side gate, not in a suit or dress shirt this time, but a dark Henley and jeans, sleeves pushed up, a brown paper bag in one hand. "I come bearing bribes," he said as he approached. Piper raised a brow. "It's barely 8. I figured if I waited until a reasonable hour, you'd already be elbows deep in drywall." She stepped aside as he climbed onto the dock. "Bribes, huh?" He held up the bag. "2 croissants, 1 cheddar scone, and a latte so good it might make you cry." "From the French place in town," she blinked. "That bakery has a 2-week wait list for catering. I know the owner." Piper took the bag and peeked inside. "You know, someday you're going to run out of ways to impress me. I'll take that as encouragement to keep trying." They sat with their legs dangling over the edge of the dock, the box between them. For a while, neither said anything. A loon called in the distance. Clementine nosed her way down the path and flopped beside them, yawning. Xander took a sip from his coffee before glancing over. "I need to tell you something." Piper looked up. "I wasn't always like this. The house, the investments, the boardrooms, it didn't start that way." She waited. "My dad left when I was 7. My mom worked double shifts just to keep the lights on. There were nights we didn't eat. When I got my first scholarship, I thought it would fix everything. But even after I made my first million, it still felt like I was one bad decision away from losing it all." Piper's voice was soft. "That's why you work like you do. I built this version of myself to survive, but lately, it's not survival I'm after." She turned to him fully. "What are you after then?" He didn't answer right away. "Then you," her breath caught. "I didn't expect you to show up that day. I didn't expect you to change the way everything in my life felt, but you did." She swallowed. "Xander, and I know you've been through your own kind of loss. I know you didn't come here looking for this. I came here to heal," she said quietly. "But that doesn't mean I can't feel something real now." He reached for her hand, their fingers tangling easily. "I don't want to be the guy who hides behind gates and meetings, not with you. I want to build something real, something that doesn't need a penthouse or a hedge fund to matter." She looked at him, eyes fierce and certain. "Then stop hiding." He leaned in but paused, giving her space. Only when she closed the distance did he kiss her slow, grounded and wrapped in everything they hadn't said until now. The lake shimmered behind them. The world stilled. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. "You know this changes everything. I'm counting on it." The next few weeks passed differently. He still traveled, still took calls, but every time he returned, there was paint on her cheek and flour on her counter and him, barefoot in her kitchen, learning what it meant to share a life instead of manage one. On a Thursday evening, she found a note on her porch. "Come next door. Bring the dog." She knocked, and the door opened to candlelight. The entire back deck had been transformed. There were hanging lanterns, pillows on the swing, a table set for 2 overlooking the water, and a plate of her favorite ribs already steaming. "You cooked?" she asked, stunned. "Let's not give me too much credit," he said. "I called in reinforcements, but I did pick the wine." There was music, soft and low, and when they danced later under the string lights, she felt something in her chest ease for the first time in years. "I never imagined this when I bought that broken-down house," she said, her voice near his ear. "I never imagined you when I built mine," he replied, "but now I can't imagine it without you." She looked up, heart thudding. "I want to wake up next to you. I want to argue about paint colors and fight over cabinet handles and find your socks in my dryer. I want everything, Piper." His hand came up, and suddenly there was a ring held between his fingers. A vintage-style gold band, delicate and warm, with a center diamond that caught the light like a tiny flame. "Marry me." Her eyes filled, but her voice didn't waver. "Yes." He pulled her close, and the crowd they weren't a part of cheered only in memory, because this wasn't a gala. There was no audience. Just the man who'd tried to keep the world at bay with walls and the woman who'd walked through them carrying a dish of mac and cheese. Later, when they stood on the dock where it all began, Clementine curled at their feet and the stars overhead. Piper turned, resting her chin on his shoulder. "You really didn't expect me that day, did you? Not even close. And now I can't imagine a single day without you." The water lapped against the wood, quiet and constant, and for the first time in both their lives that quiet felt like home. Piper stood in the middle of what used to be her living room, paint-splattered jeans rolled up at the ankle, her bare feet on the newly polished oak floors. The light filtering through the tall windows had changed. It was late afternoon now, and the sunlight painted golden stripes across the interior that finally looked like a home. Not a project, not a placeholder, a real home. Behind her, she heard the familiar low rumble of an engine. She didn't need to turn, she already felt it in her chest. A few seconds later, Xander stepped through the open front door, tie loosened, sleeves rolled to his elbows, holding a bouquet of calla lilies in one hand and a bottle of chilled wine in the other. "Before you say anything," he said, walking in and setting both on the kitchen island, "I know I missed the meeting with the tile guy. I'm prepared to beg for forgiveness." She crossed her arms and tilted her head. "The tile guy thought you were an AI hologram. Said he's been here 3 times and still hasn't seen you in daylight. I'll make it up to him too. I'll send him a fruit basket or a vacation." Piper raised an eyebrow. "Fine," he said. "A vacation with a fruit basket." She laughed, and he walked over, cupping her face gently before kissing her forehead. "I hate that I missed it," he said, "but I had to finalize something." "What's something?" He pulled a thick envelope from the inside of his jacket and handed it to her. She opened it slowly. Inside was a set of architectural renderings her house, but expanded. A greenhouse built into the side garden, a studio above the garage, everything she'd ever imagined when she first bought the place but had tucked away as impossible. She looked up, stunned. How did you even? You mentioned once that you wanted more light. I talked to your contractor. He helped me figure out how to make it happen without tearing out your favorite wall." "I didn't even think you were listening," she said, blinking rapidly. "I'm always listening to you." She wrapped her arms around his waist, burying her face against his chest. He held her close, his hand smoothing over her back slowly. "I don't need all this, she said. "You already gave me more than I ever expected." "I know," he said. "But I wanted to give you a future, not just a present." Later that evening, they sat in the backyard under a sky streaked with violet and rose. A low fire crackled in a copper pit between them. Clementine snored quietly at their feet, tail twitching in her sleep. Piper leaned back in her chair, glass of wine in hand. "You ever think about what you'd be doing right now if I hadn't wandered into your BBQ?" Xander stared at the fire, then turned to her. "I'd probably be at some dinner in the city, pretending to care about a pitch deck and wondering why everything felt so empty." She reached over and took his hand. "And now I know what full feels like." She smiled, but her voice turned quiet. "I used to think my life was going to be one long stretch of almost happy, almost settled, almost loved." "I don't do almost," he said. "Not with you." She set her glass down and moved to sit beside him, curling into his side. If we ever do get married, I want it to be here. In the yard, with your ribs and my mac and cheese and fairy lights in the trees." He looked down at her. "Are you proposing to me?" She tilted her head. "Would it scare you if I said yes?" "Not even a little." He stood, walked to the kitchen, and returned with the ring box he kept tucked in the drawer next to the coffee filters. He opened it slowly, revealing the same gold band she'd said yes to weeks ago. "Then let's make it real." She didn't hesitate. She slid the ring onto her finger, then kissed him like it was the first time, slow, certain, and filled with everything they hadn't dared to dream before. Months passed like pages in a well-loved book. The renovations finished. The greenhouse bloomed. Xander split his time more and more between Tahoe and San Francisco until one day he didn't go back at all. He moved in quietly, as if he'd always been there, his clothes in the closet, his coffee mug beside hers, his laptop left open on the kitchen island. They married in the backyard with rows of wildflowers and a string quartet playing the same song they'd danced to at the gala. Piper wore her mother's earrings. Xander wore no tie. Clementine wore a flower crown and stole a dinner roll off a guest's plate. Friends stood in a wide circle under the trees, clapping as they kissed beneath a wooden arch Piper built herself. After the guests left, after the candles burned low, they lay in a hammock under the stars, her head on his chest, his arm draped around her waist. "Do you ever wonder if this is all too good to be true?" she whispered. "No," he said. "Because I spent too long building a life I thought I wanted. This is the life I never knew I needed." She turned to look at him. "Thank you. For what? For seeing me." "For staying. I'll always stay." They fell asleep like that, tangled and weightless, the lake quiet beside them and the trees whispering overhead. Years later, Piper stood at the same dock, barefoot again, but this time with a small hand wrapped around hers. Their daughter pointed at the water, eyes wide, while Clementine, older now, slower, trotted lazily behind them. Xander was in the garden, sleeves rolled up, humming as he pulled weeds beside the greenhouse. The house behind them was full of sun, laughter, and the soft chaos of a life well lived. It wasn't the life either of them had planned. It was better.